Hello and welcome to the Fight Town podcast with myself, Alex LeBox, and Rob Boxing Shrew. Now, this week we have a very special guest in Jared Hayter, who is the commercial manager for Neilson Boxing. Jared, welcome to Fight Town podcast. How are you?
Hi guys, thanks for having me. Good, thanks. I don't know about a special guest, but certainly a guest nonetheless.
Jared,
the Sport the Song debut.
In your Sport the Song debut, you are a very special guest indeed, Jared. Now, Sport the Song listeners and of course Fight Town podcast listeners, it's been a busy start to the year for Neilson Boxing, none more so than that fantastic show at the York Hall, which saw two newly crowned champions, didn't it, Jared, in Paul Roberts and Jack McGann. We've touched on that night already, but can you just give us your sort of overview of the night very briefly in a nutshell? And obviously a big congratulations to Paul Roberts and Jack McGann.
No, definitely. It's a great one for the lads. I think the main highlights for myself, obviously coming from the more commercial side, is actually selling out York Hall, and then the new affiliation with the IBO, which was great.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Lovely belt.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Yeah, and we touched on it in the last Fight Town podcast, how beautiful that belt was. And like you said quite clearly there, Jared, it was a great night for Neilson Boxing in sending out the York Hall. But we're looking fresh face now, aren't we? Forward with Neilson Boxing to the 22nd of April at Lee Valley Leisure Complex. It's a new venue, isn't it, for Neilson Boxing? And what are we looking to look forward to there, Jared?
It's a new venue. I don't know if you're aware, but the board currently have a limit of 10 fights at York Hall, whereas it's 12 everywhere else at most venues. So it gives us the opportunity to get more lads on. And this is the first in our new series of prospect shows where really we're looking to just sort of get those lads out, get them those wins and sort of get them on the path towards titles.
Absolutely. And Rob, we've spoken about the Lee Valley Leisure Complex. It looks like a good venue for boxing, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. North London. Get yourself there if you're local. But I'm quite excited by some of the names that are on this card. I mean, yes, it is one of the prospect shows, but there's a few Neilson regulars on there, isn't there, Jared?
There is, and there's a couple to be added, but I'll wait until those are announced. But I mean, the return of John Brennan's great.
Yeah.
We've got Alfie Price, who's looking to push on towards titles later in the year. And as it stands, headlined by Johnny Ward as well.
Yeah, we love a bit of Johnny Ward on this podcast. We've spoken about him. He's got some fantastic sound bites as well as what he does in the ring. Where are we at with sort of the title picture with him at the minute? Because I know last year he was calling out William Webber on after, I think it was in the ring actually after the fight. So where are we at in terms of Johnny at the minute?
So those divisions aren't as big as maybe the welters and the middles. The super middle division. So Johnny actually, after 4 fights, was mandated to fight for the Southern Area title.
Amazing.
Shortly after, William Webber vacated.
Okay.
Interesting.
Very interesting. And since then, we have knocked on every door you can think of, be it middleweights, super middleweights, light heavyweights. And before we even get to the conversation of money, as soon as we mention Johnny's name, they run.
They don't want the smoke.
They don't want it.
Now, just a quick one on that note, and Fight Town podcast listeners, if you haven't watched Johnny Ward fight, there's a few sort of words we can use for him, but tenacity, boxing know-how, and sort of that sheer determination in a boxing ring, he's got all of it, hasn't he, Jared? And he's not only is he a great entertainer, but he's got that sort of ferocity you need in that super middleweight division to get people out of there. And if you're looking on at those sort of level of boxers, he's definitely a prospect that you would potentially run from, because he's got all the attributes to make it to the top, hasn't he?
He is. He's a special talent. But when I say we were going up the rankings, we were going very high up the rankings towards people that probably are looking more at English level and still completely avoided. So there'll be a few posts coming in the coming weeks, I think, to see if anybody's actually interested in the fight, and maybe we can put some pressure on them. But as it stands, he is mandatory for the title, and from what I believe, nobody will fight for that title until they fight him.
Yeah, and that's a good position to be in. I mean, we've had Troy Williamson on here before, and he had a very similar issue with the British title, didn't he, Alex? Getting a fight, but he was always going to be that contender. But I mean, you're keeping him busy though. So what are you doing with Johnny for the time being while we're playing the waiting game?
So Johnny is out on the 22nd, and hopefully we can get him a nice opponent to continue his growth in the rankings. If he doesn't pick up that Southern Area title, we'll just have to push on and look at English titles or international titles. So, he's a young lad. He's very, very talented. So we can't let the fact that nobody wants to fight him stunt his growth. We just have to keep moving on through the levels. And then we're looking to have him out in either June or July on either a Swindon show or a York Hall show.
Fantastic. And Jared, just to touch on, obviously, we mentioned at the beginning of the Fight Town podcast, the 2 newly crowned champions. This year so far for Neilson Boxing, and it's still very early in the year, it has been about titles and belts. And I know yourself and Mark and Kyle set out to make 2023 about getting title fights and area title fights. And I have to say it again, Mark, yourself and Kyle, you're living up to that prospect, aren't you? And people like Johnny Ward on the cusp of these sort of area title fights. Another person I want to mention who's fighting on the 22nd is Louis Horn at lightweight, because he was sensational against Josh Nelson in that round 1 knockout at York Hall. But he's out again on the 22nd, isn't he? He's one to watch, isn't he?
100%. And so he is managed by Rod Julian, who we have a great relationship with.
Yeah.
And we've already had conversations saying, right, this lad's special. Let's see how we can move him on into the title picture as well, whether that be at lightweight or at super feather.
Yeah. So is that an option for Louis Horn then to sort of still sort of deciding which sort of weight is best for him?
I think it's a case of deciding which weight's best for him. I think he is, if my memory serves me right, he's 4-0.
Yeah.
Which means he's still very early in his career. But if we can get him another couple outings, maybe some 6-rounders, some 8-rounders, then we could look at titles towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. Obviously a new addition to the stable as well, who's going to be on this card as well. Harvey Dykes. How did that signing come about? You must be absolutely chuffed with that one.
Yeah, so I think, we've only sort of come into this area from last year, but Mark, as he's been in the boxing world through his father as well, has so many connections. Yeah. And he's actually been working with Ronnie Davis on Conor Gray.
Yeah.
And it's sort of built a bit of a relationship with Ronnie and his brother Bill. And as such, they've brought on Harvey Dykes, and the first person they've come to is Mark. Now, if you Google Harvey Dykes, you will see a list of amateur accolades.
Yeah,
you'll see a video of the lad boxing on BBC. So he's some lad, and really that's a big jewel in the crown for us.
And I mean, at a national level as well. I mean, you only have to look at the names that were on the list before him to see, the pedigree of winning that title. I know it's different in a pro game, but yeah, just what a feather in the cap to get him on board.
100%. And yeah, I mean, a lot of the time people say he's world class, he's world class. If you look at the guy's pedigree, I think it's quite easy to say he should be world class when he steps up in the pros.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what we've seen a lot of, Jared, especially in the last couple of years, is boxing promoters bringing out these new heavyweights. We've seen Queensbury bring on, his name escapes me now, the new, who's the new? Dubois. Yeah, we've got Dubois, and we've got a few. Itoma as well. We've got Itoma coming out. We've got these new heavyweights buzzing. Is that something that you, Mark and Carl, looked at to get a heavyweight into the Neilson boxing scene? Was that always the plan?
So I think he campaigned at heavyweight previously. I don't know if he'll stay at heavyweight or potentially drop to cruiser eventually.
Okay.
And then obviously we've got Jack Bannister, who's quite a good amateur at that weight as well. So yes, the higher weights, because everybody loves a knockout and everybody loves a heavy puncher.
Yeah.
So I think adding to those higher weight classes is definitely something we want to keep doing.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic.
I've got a quick question as well. Obviously, the York Hall show was a massive success. And that was obviously off the back of, unfortunately, Casey Kademi getting injured, wasn't it? Obviously, you've probably seen Ijaz Ahmed and Marcel Braithwaite, unbelievable fight last week. That's ended up in a draw. So where does that leave the Ahmed and Kademi fight now? Have you had initial talks on that?
There have been discussions. I think it does. I mean, you can't knock the guy. He's gone out and he's fought every single time, and for some reason, he can't get a win or a loss.
He loves the draw, doesn't he?
The draw. In reality, he came out after and said maybe that's him done. So I think until those questions are answered, we can't really push on any forward.
Yeah.
Braithwaite, as you know, we had him on when we were at the Shankly.
Yeah.
and Kadimi is with the WBM.
Yeah.
So potentially that's something that could be looked at if Ahmed does step away from boxing.
Yeah, I mean, Kademi against Braithwaite or Ahmed again. I mean, it can't be boring, can it?
You'd hope it can't be a draw either, but you never.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Just going back quickly, Jared. So it as Ahmed has suggested that he's might call it down boxing completely.
I saw a few post-fight interviews, and he just said, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Maybe it's heat of the moment and emotion after the fight potentially, but I think that's something for the board to sit down with, because obviously through Casey's injury they've had to make a different call. Now they've got 3 lads potentially who need to fight. This isn't influencer boxing, so we can't put all 3 of them in the ring at the same time.
Don't get me started, Jared.
So yeah, the board are going to have to make a decision to see how they do that. I don't know if they, for one time call in a 4th judge to make the final decision or something, but I feel like that belt needs to go somewhere.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Good words there, Jared, as well. Now, Jared, another fighter on the card is John the Don Brennan. We mentioned him briefly. He's fought quite a bit on Neilson Boxing shows. I believe one of his last outings was against Jack McGann, in which he was stopped. Quote me if I'm wrong. But what's the plan for the Don this year?
So John's got a bit of a special place in my heart. He's from near me. He's from sort of the Slough area, and I'm only down the road. That's why we sort of had these cards in Bracknell in this kind of way. And we've actually started building up some contacts within the area to potentially have a nice show this way towards the end of the year.
Right.
Now, Johnny's getting to the tail end of his career, and what we'd love to do is get him that title that he's chased his whole career. He's boxed here, there, and everywhere. He's boxed abroad. He's been in the home corner. He's been in the away corner. He really does deserve a title.
Right.
So we're going to work this year, get John back on track, and hopefully get him that title in a homecoming fight towards the end of the year.
Southern area, do you think?
We don't know yet. It depends. The picture, I mean, it changes month by month, doesn't it? The board notices come out, and all of a sudden so and so is mandatory, or somebody picks up an injury. So let's not put a name on it. It could be international. It could be something to do with the board. We'll have to see where we get to come the end of the year. But it'd be great for John to get a title this year.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. It would be the cherry on top of the cake for what's been a great career for John Brennan. Like you said, he's been in that home corner and away corner, and we know how tough that is, especially when you're fighting on some of these smaller hall shows. Hats off to John Brennan. So it leaves us to say, Fight Town podcast listeners, on the 22nd of April, Neilson Boxing are back. It's a new venue. It's going to be a great evening, as always, with Neilson Boxing shows. You know what you get quality boxing for, and a great evening's entertainment. Jared, you'll be there, won't you? What else have we got on display on the 22nd?
I will be there. I won't run through the card. As I said, there's loads of prospects there. What I would say is watch out for announcements coming. We do have our June card in Swindon. Potentially another new venue for us in June as well. And another big July card at York Hall.
Absolutely fantastic. So Fight Town podcast listeners, keep your finger on the pulse with Neilson Boxing, because there's plenty more shows coming out. And as we've seen so far this year, Neilson Boxing are certainly getting these fighters into the mix when it comes to title contention. Anything else from you, gentlemen, before we call a day this week?
I have one question. We had Mark on at the beginning of the year to sort of reflect on last year and preview the shows coming up this year, Jared. And I'm not sure if did you hear that episode?
Yeah, I've listened to everything.
He teased us with a trip to Nigeria. Where are we at with this?
To be confirmed. I mean, we saw the other week that Elizabeth and Tosin both got wins.
Yeah, amazing. It was on the same card, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they continue to push forward. I think realistically, they could probably do with another couple, maybe one, before they really start pushing into title contention, especially when you look at the length of rounds for title fights. I think that's a big thing that sometimes people overlook when they're building fighters. Let's see where it takes us.
Yeah, fantastic.
Well then, gentlemen, Jared, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Jared.
Fight Town podcast, we shall see you on the next show. Take care.
Thanks, lads. Cheers.